Hello, my name is Nesbitt, and over the course of the past year, I have been following the many cases of police brutality in America. These cases are all very tragic, especially those that result in deaths of members of communities. Before conducting any research, I had felt like police officers were always in the wrong during cases of misconduct. I always felt like nothing was being done. I thought that if all of our people were able to express their disapproval as a nation, then the government would step in and fix it. Unfortunately, I now understand protesting police misconduct is much easier said than done. In this short documentary, I will examine several cases of police brutality and misconduct alongside the public response of citizens. Consent of the governed is a value and principle of democracy in the United States. This allows citizens to express their approval or disapproval of government actions. Through my research, I've learned all the legal ways that a citizen in America can protest. For example, a petition is a formal written document to ask a government official to do or not to do something. People circulate the document to get as many citizens as possible to sign it to make it more effective. Picketing and boycotting are the physical ways of protest. Picketing is the most common and is usually covered by local news stations.
Now, just coming into this area, I didn't even need to follow Twitter to find out where the protesters were. All you need to do is follow the sound of the helicopters and follow the lines of trucks of reinforcements coming into this area. Now, we talked to a lot of the people here protesting the verdict, what happened to Michael Brown, and also the larger issue. Let's listen to what they had to say.
We're not burning, we're not looting, we're not doing anything. We're out here in front of LAPD. LAPD is being cooperative tonight. I will say that for the camera. But, man, these things have to change. The only way these things will change is if we all come together in numbers to make a difference.
I've been profiled my whole entire life. Enough is enough. We're tired of putting our hands up.
Sometimes these peaceful protests can spiral out of hand and rioting and looting occur.
I said I'm tired of being peaceful and tired of being calm. You know, they've been going to war on us for over 400 years. So, hey, I ain't peaceful. I ain't no protester. I'm violent.
Disperse immediately and stop throwing objects at law enforcement.
No, throw this shit back.
Burn that motherfucker down.
This is just the beginning. This is going to go on just like it did before for days and days and days, and they're going to need the National Guard because it's not finna stop.
This violence is in response to the death of 18-year-old Michael Brown that occurred on August 9, 2014. Michael Brown was reported earlier that day stealing a box of cigarettes from a convenience store. At noon, Officer Darren Wilson drove up to Brown in the middle of Canfield Drive. A physical struggle then took place through the window of the police SUV. Wilson's gun fired twice in the car. Brown fled, but Wilson got out of the car to pursue Brown. Then, Wilson fired his gun at Brown. Wilson fatally shot Brown, and Brown was struck 6 times. Some witnesses claimed Brown was surrendering with his hands in the air, but others say Brown was moving towards the officer. The citizens of Ferguson, Missouri were enraged. Early protests quickly turned violent. The police responded with military-style weapons and equipment. On August 10th, the day after Brown's shooting, local police stations assembled approximately 150 officers in riot gear, when citizens began to vandalize vehicles and loot businesses. By August 14th, everything had escalated. Officers were forced to begin firing tear gas and rubber bullets at aggressive and violent protesters. On August 18th, the National Guard was ordered to Ferguson, but they only remained there for 4 days. Heavily armed teams tried to contain the situation. Police blocked roads and dispersed protesters. Their goal was to keep protesters from blocking roads and to prevent violence. In reality, the heavy-handed response made the cops appear as an occupying force to protesters. This rose tensions with an already upset community. On November 24th, a grand jury announced that Darren Wilson, the officer who shot Michael Brown, would not be indicted. The citizens voiced their disapproval, but it was through violence. In Ferguson that week, 17 businesses saw their buildings destroyed by riots so badly that they were deemed unsafe structures. The price value of the buildings destroyed was about $3 million. Another $37 billion sustained damage through vandalism. Many people argue the idea that police are using the same violence that protesters use. However, it is the officer's job to maintain social order as workers of the government. Any form of violent protest warrants a police retaliation. It only takes one or two people to start throwing rocks at officers for a peaceful protest to quickly become a violent and destructive protest. Another instance of a citizen being fatally shot by an officer is John Crawford. The shooting of 22-year-old John Crawford III occurred on August 5, 2014 in Dayton, Ohio. Crawford was shopping at a local Walmart store and was looking at unpackaged pellet air rifles. A distraught customer named Ronald Ritchie called 911. He claimed that Crawford was pointing a real gun at children and loading it with bullets. 2 officers arrived at the Walmart and shot and killed John Crawford. According to police, Crawford did not respond to verbal commands and would not lie on the ground. They claim he then made movements as if he was trying to escape. Fortunately, the whole scene was caught on the store's camera. There was a debate over whether the footage should be released, but eventually it was. The store video revealed that Crawford was talking on his cell phone, holding the pellet gun, when he was killed. The officers fired immediately without giving any verbal commands. A grand jury decided not to indict the officer who killed Crawford, but his family has started an online petition to make the officer accountable for his actions. A major issue with cases of police misconduct is determining the real story and deciding if it was acceptable for a police to shoot at the suspect/criminal.
When a petition to the White House reaches 100,000 signatures, the administration will eventually issue a response. And one petition calling for a new law that would require police to wear cameras while on duty just passed that mark. The petition argues that forcing officers to record their interaction with the public will deter things like police brutality, racial profiling, and the abuse of power. They also argue that it will hold all parties within a police investigation accountable for their actions, eliminating that he said, she said type of questions that can come out of situations like the killing of Michael Brown by police in Ferguson, Missouri. Which is sound reasoning, but is there any evidence of this working in real life? And are there equally valid arguments against it? Well, one police force has tested this approach, and they did find positive results. In February 2012, Rialto, California started supplying officers with cameras they could clip onto their uniforms. At any given time, around half of their active duty officers wore the cameras. They found that in a 12-month period, the department overall had an 88% decline in the number of complaints filed against officers and a 60% decline in the use of force by officers. They also found that officers wearing a camera were half as likely to use force than officers not wearing one. Clear evidence that police wearing cameras is a good thing. Could argue that there are some privacy issues to consider. Could footage of your home or office end up on the news without your consent? What about places where a reasonable person would have an expectation of privacy, like a bathroom or locker room? Could you be recorded there? What about innocent bystanders? Is a police action happening around you but not to you enough justification to include you in their video? Would the video of your arrest become part of the public record even if you were never charged with or guilty of a crime? There are also some more Big Brother-ish questions that people have considered. Would police be allowed to randomly scour through old video in the hopes of finding new crimes? These are obviously difficult questions, but considering the current situation in Ferguson and the extreme amount of misinformation that is coming out about the killing of Michael Brown, some would argue that increasing the level of transparency in law enforcement through advanced technology like digital video is a tactic worth trying. If you'd like to see more of our videos on Ferguson and why police are allowed to use lethal force,
the obvious solution is for every police officer to wear body cameras. Body cameras will tell the whole story during confrontation between officers and citizens. Both citizens and officers will benefit. Citizens will have video proof that the officer who confronted them was indeed acting irrational and prove that it was a case of misconduct. These films will also debunk any false accusations of police misconduct. The Department of Justice created a $20 million project to have every officer using body cameras. Also, Missouri Senator Claire McCaskill said that police departments across America should not receive any future government funding unless they require their officers to use body cameras.
With all the talk about police brutality in the U.S. right now, we wanted to answer a seemingly simple question. When is it okay for police to shoot someone in the U.S.? We're not talking on ethical grounds, we just wanted some straightforward legal guidelines. And as you may have guessed, they aren't as simple as you'd hope. The first thing to know is officers are trained to use their guns as a last resort. But even then, people always ask, why don't they just shoot in the arm or leg? Cops are actually trained to aim here rather than here or here, meaning they probably won't miss and the suspect probably won't survive. So when is it actually okay for cops to kill? Under U.S. law, there are two circumstances. The first is in defense of life, whether it's to protect their own life or the life of another. So if a suspect is aiming a gun or what looks like a gun directly at an officer, then the officer can legally shoot the suspect if he believes his life is in danger. The second circumstance is to prevent a suspect from escaping, but only if the cop has reason to think that the suspect poses a significant violent threat to the community, whatever that means. This became law thanks to the 1985 Tennessee versus Garner Supreme Court case, which concluded that it was a Fourth Amendment violation for police to fire at unarmed, nonviolent people running away. In the case, Edward Garner, not to be confused with Eric Garner, was shot dead by two police officers after he fled the scene of a house burglary. The officers were trying to stop Garner from climbing a fence to get away when they killed him. $10 and a purse were found in Garner's possession, and he was 15. So there's gotta be a significant threat, but according to who? The legal answer? The officer involved. They have to have, quote, objectively reasonable belief that there was a threat, even if there wasn't. This law comes from another Supreme Court ruling, 1989's Graham versus Connor. In this case, DeThorne Graham was having a diabetic attack, went to buy an orange juice from a convenience store, but quickly left when he saw the long line. A nearby officer suspected that Graham was robbing the store when he saw his quick exit, so he slammed him against the hood of a police car, breaking Graham's foot. The court ruled that officers don't have to demonstrate whether or not their intentions were good, but rather that their actions were objectively reasonable, given their perception of what happened. Okay, so that's the law for everybody, but police departments' policies vary. Some only allow their officers to use lethal force in the first circumstance or in defense of life. If their cops fire at a fleeing suspect, they could lose their jobs, but they probably won't be charged with a crime. So for a cop to shoot his gun, he's got to have an objectively reasonable belief that there is a significant threat. When you really think about it, there is no standard for knowing when lethal force is needed. It really just depends on how the cop sees it.
The issue with police cases that involve the officer firing his or her gun is that it is up to the officer involved if the suspect is a significant threat. Every officer may have a different viewpoint of how much a threat someone is. An option to solve this would be to make stricter guidelines of when a suspect is indeed a threat. Anytime an officer shoots a suspect, they can say that they truly believe that there was a prevalent threat to the community. Also, officers could claim that they thought they saw a gun or an object that resembled a gun. This is where body cameras would provide valuable assistance. There would be no honor code for officers to tell the truth, just a real video of what happened. On July 17, 2014, Eric Garner died from compression of the neck after being put in a chokehold by an officer for 15 minutes. NYPD policy prohibits the use of chokeholds. Garner was approached on suspicion of selling single cigarettes from packs without tax stamps. Garner resisted arrest because he said that he was tired of being harassed and that he was not selling cigarettes. Garner resisted arrest. Garner was then put into a chokehold and then had his face pushed into the ground. Garner repeated 11 times that he couldn't breathe. Once Garner made it to the hospital, he was pronounced dead upon arrival. The death was ruled a homicide, but a grand jury did not indict the officer. After the grand jury's decision, protesting pursued. 300 people were arrested in New York City on December 4th and 5th. Most of them were for disorderly conduct, but 2 were for assault on police. On December 20th, 2 NYPD officers were killed in an ambush in Brooklyn. The suspected killer announced on Instagram that he wanted revenge for the deaths of Michael Brown and Eric Gardner. A solution to this type of police brutality is to not resist arrest. Even if you have not committed a crime, you should still let yourself be arrested. Unfortunately, the other option may just be your life. It may not seem fair at the time, but if you have not committed a crime, you should not be worrying. We must care about this issue. It is important to stress our nation's disapproval, but in a legal and peaceful way. Police officers are here to protect us, but it sometimes feels like they aren't doing a good job at their duty to their nation. Police misconduct and brutality could be soon lessened if all officers were to wear body cameras. Also, it is amazing that communities are able to unite and express what change they want to see. However, it is not acceptable for any form of violent protest to occur. Police officers no longer listen to rioters. They now see every single person as a threat to their city and decide to retaliate to protect themselves and property. If everyone can peacefully gather to protest, the members of government whom we elected will work with us to solve this issue.